Japan. A country that brags about two things. The first is their used underwear vending machines, which yes, you really can find on the streets. And the second is their immigration rate, which is by far the lowest in the developed world. For comparison, in the United States, the immigrant population is about 14%, Canada and New Zealand have 20 and 25% respectively, and then there's Japan with an immigration population of less than 2%. So, what's the reason for this? Well, quite simply, it's their very restrictive immigration system. This makes Japan something of a dream country for politicians like Donald Trump or Marine Le Pen. If there is one word that could define the current political debate, that word would be immigration. In Europe, countries are arguing about what to do with refugees, and it seems that politicians across the board seem to think that immigration is a problem that needs to be stopped.
Immigration has fallen under this government, and we've cut net migration by a third.
Anyone who illegally crosses the border will be detained until they are removed out of our country and back to the country from which they came.
Since I took office, we've deployed more border agents and technology to our southern border than ever before.
So then, Japan is a perfect example of what a country would look like without really many immigrants at all. And so now you might be wondering, what exactly does that mean for Japan's economy? Do they really save money because they don't have to spend on social policies for immigrants? Further, do Japanese workers enjoy a higher standard of life because they don't have to compete for jobs with foreign workers? And on this episode of VisualPolitik, we are going to be answering those questions. But before we get into all of that, we need to have a close look at Japan's immigration law.
One country, one culture, one race.
This statement was said by the man who was the Prime Minister of Japan in the mid-1980s. This man was Yasuhiro Nakasone. The statement clearly summarizes the immigration policy of Japan. Basically, there are just two ways to get into the land of the rising sun. One is with a work contract and the other is with a tourist visa. If a company wants to hire you from overseas, you will need a work visa. And the only possible way that you can get that visa is to have a university degree or have some specific skills that are practically impossible to find in the Japanese labor market. So if you are just a construction worker, you are never going to get a work permit for Japan. That is, unless you use this other program.
Bien, Japón, como no tenía otra forma de...
Since Japan didn't have a law to accept workers from other Asian countries like Vietnam or Philippines, they created the so-called Technical Internal Training Program.
This, in summary, is sort of like being an intern in Japan, except you get about half the salary that a Japanese intern would get. Not only that, but with this technical internal training program, your boss is even allowed to hold onto your passport and access your bank account. More worryingly than that, since they started this program, thousands of Asian immigrants have simply disappeared.
When the union representative spoke with me, she said that my attitude was bad and that if I continue to have this attitude, if my actions continue, her friend will hire a hitman to kill me.
So, well, what if you enter with a tourist visa? Well, in that case, you could stay in the country for a year and a half as long as you can prove that you are studying Japanese. Once that initial time has passed, you need to get hired by a company. This can lead to you getting a work visa, but do watch out here because unlike in the United States or certain European countries, this work visa stipulates what your profession is. So, for example, if you get that work visa saying that you are a chef, then you can only work in a restaurant. If you break this rule and do some sort of other work, then the government will not renew your visa. There is only one really effective way for a foreigner to make a living in Japan.
Lo más fácil que tenemos aquí.
The easiest thing to live here is marrying a Japanese person.
Now I hope you can understand why in a country with over 127 million inhabitants, only 2 million of them are immigrants. But what consequences does this have on the daily lives of Japanese citizens?
Who pays the Japanese pensions?
Japan is the oldest country in the world. Not because of their long history, but because of the actual physical age of their population. In fact, estimations say that in the next 90 years, they're going to lose about 44 million people from their population, which is about the entire population of Canada. Now, this wouldn't be a problem if it wasn't for the social security system. As you probably know, the pension system in most countries in the world works in the following way. The people who are working today are the ones who are paying the pensions of the people who are retired today. As the workforce gets smaller and smaller year after year, the number of people paying those pensions is getting smaller. Further, on the other side of things, more and more people are retiring who are drawing more and more social security. And this leads to problems like this.
Social security contributions cover only 60% of these benefits. The remaining 40 trillion yen comes from taxes, or more precisely, public deficits.
By the way, the music you're hearing in this video is from the Spanish band Mescalina. If you like it and want to check out more of their stuff, do look in the description box below for links. And this is why, and pay attention to this part, Japan has the highest public debt of any country in the world. Their current debt level is more than double their GDP. And their fiscal deficit, the difference between their income and their spending, is higher than the one in the United States. In other words, if Angela Merkel were to go to Japan, she'd probably get very, very angry. So now you might be wondering, well, what does all of this have to do with immigration? Well, the answer is a lot. You see, we've all heard about how expensive it is to integrate immigrants. You have to pay for social programs, integration courses, etc., etc. But no one really talks about how much a native citizen costs the government. For an example, an American-born citizen costs the government $150,000 by the time they are aged 16. And this is only for education and healthcare. Depending on the state that person lives in, you might have to add in other expenses. But the government sees all of this as an investment, because when that person starts paying taxes, they're going to get that money back. On the other hand, let's take an example of a Vietnamese immigrant to Japan. He comes to the country when he is old enough to start working. His education and healthcare was already paid for by the Vietnamese government. And in an average of 2 years, that Vietnamese immigrant is going to find a job. Now, of course, that job might be a low-paid one, and he might pay just a little tax, but the Japanese government didn't have to invest any money into him. So, in other words, immigrants are free cash for the government. Since Japan has so few immigrants, they are losing out on this easy influx of cash. This is why, in the middle of a fiscal crisis in 2015, the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe made the following announcement.
Japan under pressure to accept more immigrants as workforce shrinks.
But despite what it looks like, this is not Japan's biggest problem. Japan has seen the last 20 years go by with no economic growth. This is what experts have called the lost decades, and it has a lot to do with immigration as well.
Country that stopped innovating.
We all imagine Japan as a country of technology and innovation. The country where companies like Nintendo, Sony, Toshiba, where they were all born. Nonetheless, the reality is these companies are really old. Nintendo was founded in 1889, and Toyota was created in 1937. Actually, can anybody name any Japanese companies that were created in the 21st century? You probably couldn't, but on the other hand, you could probably name 5 to 10 American companies that were formed during the same period.
Immigrant founders started 52% of all new Silicon Valley companies between 1995 and 2005.
The entrepreneurial rate among immigrant populations is 2 to 3 times higher than natives, and this is a trend that you find in every country. For instance, one of the founders of Google, Sergey Brin, was born in Moscow. Further, the co-founder of WhatsApp was born in Ukraine. But this isn't just about Silicon Valley startups. Just take a walk around your neighborhood and you'll see hundreds of Chinese stores, Mexican restaurants, and all other kinds of small businesses created by immigrants. And it does make complete sense that immigrants will have an entrepreneurial spirit. At the end of the day, those who leave their home country are risk takers. Not only that, but immigrants bring with them their culture to a new country, which helps them in thinking outside of the box. Let's take a look at another example. Charles Belmont was a German immigrant to New York City in the 19th century. Soon he realized that the workers in the city needed some sort of food that could be cooked and sold on the streets. That's when he decided to import sausages from his home country, and that's when the hot dog was born. Today, this meal feeds millions of people from all around the planet. And this is just one example. There are thousands upon thousands more. In short, when cultures mix, new ideas and methodologies are created. This is what business people call innovation. And this is the special sauce that makes companies and countries grow. So, well, what's going on in Japan? Unsurprisingly, Japan has the lowest entrepreneurial rate in the developed world. Just 7% of the population decides to start a business. By comparison, in countries like Canada and New Zealand, that percentage is about 10%. The Japanese dream isn't to start your own business, it's to get hired by one that already exists. You know, those big companies that we previously mentioned, like Sony and Toshiba. Companies that have the same corporate and work structure that they had in the 1980s.
Traditional Japanese electronic powerhouses such as Sharp and Sony have incurred huge losses and shed thousands of jobs, while competitors Apple and Samsung have continued to increase their market shares.
Those who like football, or what Americans call soccer, might keep up with the World Cup or the UEFA Championships. 20 years ago, there were at least 2 Japanese companies sponsoring these events. In 2016, the European Cup had no Japanese sponsors. And no matter where you look, Japanese companies are struggling to compete with European, American, and even Chinese companies. And the reason is not a lack of money, it's a lack of innovation. And this explains why Japan's economy has been so frozen over the last 2 decades. And of course, this is having a major impact on the lives of Japan's citizens. In order to keep productivity up, Japanese workers have the longest working hours and the shortest holidays of any developed nation. Meanwhile, they still have the same salaries that their parents have. So that is our opinion here at VisualPolitik, and now we would love to know yours. Do you think Japan should open its doors to immigrants, or do you think other countries should follow Japan's example and close their doors to immigrants? Use the comment section below to let us know. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please do give us a thumbs up below, and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos every Monday and Thursday, and I'll see you next time.